Front of the mic, please.
Feel
ASMR.
free to leave
Yeah.
Oh,
materials on screen.
Oh man.
Why would we get so many more
ASMR
customers?
cereal. There's like 100 cereals. You could do 5 minutes of each one. I would smash that like.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome back. We skipped last week, obviously, so this week we have a few updates coming from the work over the last couple of weeks, including some docs review from Mr. Kalkaban. We have Jimmy who's going to join and talk about all the work that's been going on with Peregrine and the new kind of capabilities of Peregrine. We'll talk a little bit about what's coming with the 4.0 release. And then we'll kind of wrap or open it up to anybody else that's on the line that has questions or anything that they want to show from the broader audience. So maybe we'll, Mr. Kalkaban, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, sure. Let's share my screen. All right. You guys see my screen? So,
Yes.
doc updates. We have a couple of topics that address this issue that a community member created on backend architecture and caching. Basically, it's an overview of storefront architecture based on an outline that James created. So you can get to that in the overview section, and it'll be these three topics: PWA, storefront architecture. The first one is just an overview index page, just to give you some background in for the storefront architecture. And there is a topic for the runtime architecture, which goes over how the storefront connects to Magento when it's deployed in production, basically. And the other one is the build time architecture. It goes over the stuff that we provide, like the build pipeline. It uses Venue as an example, but this can apply to your own project, or you don't have to necessarily stick to this, but this is what we consider ideal architecture for PWA Studio's storefront. So yeah, are there any questions over that? No questions.
I mean, I expect that the folks on this call who've been looking for a little bit more clarity about how we expect a deployed store to work and how we expect the store to deploy will be interested in reading this, but it's probably gonna, we're gonna need some time for them to read this before we get feedback, right?
That's true.
But I can tell you, having had the privilege of reading this already, it's good.
Thanks.
It's really good, and it should clarify. But please, I think the best thing to do, I don't know, what would you prefer, James? Is if somebody wants clarification on stuff like this, do you want them to open an issue, to give us feedback?
Give us feedback. Actually, raises an issue, so that would be the best thing to do.
Yeah. So, and that's a super cool feature.
What was that?
You click give us feedback on any of the pages, and it opens an issue related to that particular. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's from the Magento Dev Docs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So please feel free to do that. You can talk to us in Slack, but that's an ephemeral thing, so it might go unnoticed unless you open an issue.
Yeah, because then we can put it in the backlog and we can room it.
But if you read this and you find that it's clarified an ongoing question for you, we would be in your debt if you were to share it with others in community. Post this around and see if it helps clarify things for people. That's what would be great.
Awesome. So again, last chance for questions for Jimothy on the docs update there. So let's, I see Jimmy's on the line. So Jimmy, I know you wanted to give an update on where we're at with Peregrine, where we're headed with Peregrine. So I'll
Sure.
turn that over to you.
Cool. I will share my screen here in a second. All right, there we go. You can see my screen.
Not yet.
No?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my internet's still a little flaky. It has been rough the last couple days. So we talked before for last few months about uh, trying to build out Peregrine as a library of hooks that would basically act sort of like mix-ins, that they would be the body of all the components that we have in Venia, and that they would have all the logic, they would interact with app state, and they would be the kind of thing that an app like Venia could call and then simply render DOM, class names, and styles in order to be kind of like a theme, right? That was our vision for this separation between Peregrine and Venia, but that obviously that's not what Peregrine has been. Peregrine's mostly up until now just been a library of utility functions, and like reusable tools and stuff. So we had a lot of work to do in order to get closer to that vision. So for the last few weeks, Stephen and I have been hard at work actually implementing this stuff. So, one of the big changes that had to come as part of that in order to make Peregrine come to life is we had to put app state in Peregrine. It doesn't make sense for Peregrine to depend on app state from Venia when Venia then imports and depends on Peregrine for all of the work. So app state and most of the interactions with it should happen in Peregrine. So we had to move a lot of stuff. So I broke that work down here into 6 tasks. That from the first place we would look at whether we needed to keep Redux or not. We ended up deciding to keep it. We wanted to extract as much local state from reducers as possible. We wanted to make that global state in the Redux store available via context. So rather than connecting to a store, you just would use a hook to consume it straight from context, slice by slice. And then from there, we'd be able to move global state context providers over to Peregrine, rebind components to consume context instead of connecting, and we'd be able to extract any logic into Peregrine hooks. So if you've been watching open PRs or looking for conversation around PWA Studio, we've been doing that as part of a feature branch here. And we've done a lot of work. We've touched a lot of files, moved a lot of code, but haven't really torn up anything. This is not so much an overhaul of the code as just moving things around, which is ideal. So basically what we've done so far is we've done these first 4 steps. We're working on this 5th one now, and in the next couple of weeks we'll work on the last step. And so pretty quickly here, we're going to have merged into develop Peregrine for real. And this is basically going to look pretty familiar if you've seen the work we've done with context before. So writing a component in this way. See if I can go look up a context provider. So for each slice of application state, what we're doing is we're basically pulling in, basically connecting a context provider to the Redux store here. So like here, we're pulling user state and all of the user actions, connecting them to the store so the provider gets them as props, and then coerce them into our familiar array format, which is state followed by an API object that has all the actions on it. And then we're passing this context value to the provider, which will make this context value available to any component in the tree in the whole app to consume. So just by calling this use user context function from within any component, you can get access to user state and user API. We have one of these for each of the slices of state. And in this way, if we ever decide to make changes to the Redux layer of our system, that'll happen inside Peregrine invisibly to every component that consumes it. So that way, if we have further changes to this structure, all the apps that people are building on top of this won't have to change. So that's the high-level overview. This is still basically work in progress, but it's come a long way, and I would look forward to being able to use this kind of stuff in the next few weeks.
Great. Do we have any questions for Jimmy?
I have some leading questions, some of which I know the answer to, but I just want to get some clarity on them.
Sure.
So first of all, since we're keeping Redux, but you're adding this alternative way of getting store state from the context API instead of through just React Redux map state to props bindings, the connect function,
Mm-hmm.
do you recommend that for all new work, you use those contexts? Or is there some use case where you'd recommend building new stuff on React Redux and connecting directly to the store?
I would say that for the 99% use case, the
Mhm.
contexts will be better because it should be more performant and it should be easier, cleaner code to write. You won't have to make a container component. But since Peregrine just has pure dependencies, an app like Benia should have access to the connect function, and they'll have access to the store through context. So you can still connect if you have an advanced use case where you want to like map dispatch or something, and have it do a custom function just for your component. So the door is still open there, but yeah, recommend context.
So it's fair to say that connecting to Redux is not exactly a legacy API that you should stop using, but an advanced API that we've added a layer of abstraction over to make it a little easier to use.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it for
Faster
sure.
and better. Yeah,
I
faster,
don't have any.
better, stronger.
Yeah, I don't have we don't have plans to deprecate it right now because I don't have plans to replace it right now.
Gotcha.
But it is possible that in the future we would. So we definitely won't change out the context providers. So safer to go with the context providers as well, I would say.
Gotcha. Cool. The two other things I wanted you to briefly mention were you have a context.js now. Is there a new file system convention we'd like to enforce apart from actions, async actions, reducers in a store slice, the addition of the context.js file, or not?
So that's actually a good question. So while we've been working on this, I've been trying to avoid spending too much time during the development on enforcing a particular structure there. But as we're getting ready to merge these, into develop and start using them, we're going to have to pick a pattern like that we want to recommend. So that's something that I hope we'll get feedback on in these PRs and be able to actually document a recommended structure, because it is important. We just didn't want to get bogged down with it during the development.
Understood. And that's fair. Do you Do you want to backlog or call out the desire to do that, or do you think it's not urgent to do it right now?
Yeah, I'll call it out. I'll make sure it's in the PR as an acceptance criteria.
Okay. Last thing is, do you think store slices are a thing now? Like, do you think they're a public API that you can start to describe as like, well, it's a combination of actions and reducers and context that we expose them. Like, here is its. Should we document store slice instead of just kind of referring to it as a Redux concept?
I think so. I think that actually makes sense. One of the major motivators for doing this in the first place is that it's hard to extend a Redux store. If you wanted to add your
Yeah.
own state to it, because it's kind of like all private, and there's really no way to extend it. You just have to go straight modify it. So the hope here is that the Redux store can become sort of just a collection of these slices, which are what we think of people using, and that extending it would basically mean people adding their own providers. So if you had a new slice of state you wanted to add, you don't even have to touch the store. You just add a new context provider in your app and follow the same pattern that we used for creating it. So
Gotcha. Decent.
yeah, we need to make the concept more clear that it's like you're interacting with slices and not just the store.
Man, interacting with slices. Anyone else hungry?
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cowabunga.
I am open to food metaphors
Ooh.
for naming these
Ooh,
stuff.
that's way better than car metaphors. That's all I got. I just was trying to prompt that discussion, but I would love to give folks from the community and from elsewhere a chance to react to this and discuss it.
Yeah, and someone stop me from calling peregrine hooks eggs, please.
Oh, come on.
Somebody stop me.
Really
I was going to say, should we call them masks?
So, any other questions or early feedback from maybe community members on the line?
Yeah,
It
just
doesn't
one
have
quick
to be
question.
here. Yeah, sure.
So does this mean when we're building out components and stuff like that, we're going to be abandoning the idea of having like a container.js file for each component? That each component will kind of be pulling in Redux individually as opposed to using that kind of container wrapper in the Venue UI folder?
Yeah, that's the goal. Like I said, you'll have the option because you'll have the connect function, and so it'll be, the store will still be there in context, connect will still work, but you can basically do all of that work just by calling a single hook within the
Nice.
component.
Yeah. And the hook functions as the same type of loose coupling that having a container and a presentational component used to do, with the great advantage that now you don't always basically need to pass both of those around together for it to be useful. Now you really do have the ability to replace a hook because the presentational component is calling the hook from inside itself, which is a nice upgrade to modularity.
Right. When you connect to the store, obviously the store updates when any part of the store changes, Redux issues an update. And then so the connect function has to slice up the whole store and like decide whether a relevant update has happened, and then and then sort of force a render of the component. So there can be, in some cases there can be performance issues there. So with the hook, since you're only subscribing to that slice, and since it's only connected in one spot, those heuristics should be a lot more successful, I think. We should get some small performance gains out of this.
What they call a pit of success. Do you have any questions
I don't see any questions in the chat, but maybe just one last chance here. Obviously, it goes without saying that more information will be coming, right? Documentation will be following. So I think this is an early sneak peek at all of the work that Jimmy, that Steven, and the rest of the team have been putting into Peregrine. But we'll definitely have more opportunities to get some feedback from the broader audience. But we have one last opportunity here on the call for anyone that has any commentary or feedback or questions.
Yeah, please chime in on the PR. Very interested in getting more eyes on it.
Yeah, very much like the documentation. I understand that at this sync call, people haven't had much of a chance to digest this and react to it. We're going to have another sync. Next Friday, I'm flying to Munich. So I won't be at it. But I would hope that if anyone on this call has taken a look at the documentation for Mr. Kalkoven's summation of the runtime, build time architectures, or for Jimmy and Steven's huge body of work about Peregrine, that you would record those questions and bring them to the next community sync meeting. We'd like to kind of encourage that. And that's not just to try and extract more value out of you, though I'd love to, but it's also so that you can hold us accountable to our decision making instead of just being there for us to check in about what we decided last week. So yeah, bring that to our attention. Next week, the stuff that you learned this week. That's the idea.
Great call up. So quickly, I will share my screen and pull up maybe Jimothy's issue and PR for the 4.0.0 release notes. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. So the issue number is 1647, but it obviously links to the PR, which is 1676. I would say, I'm not going to go through all of the details in here, but if you're interested in what's coming out in the upcoming release, you can see that the team has done a ton of work in here for not only quality work with bug fixes and refactor work. You can start to see some of the Peregrine library work that's been done, and also some build tool enhancements and kind of CI tool enhancements that are going to be rolling out with 4.0.0. So if you're interested in what's coming out and getting an early preview of it and you have questions about it, feel free to go to the issue, go to the PR, which is again 1676, and check out what's going on there and ask us any questions either in the Slack channel or on the issue or PR itself. Anything else to add there, team? Fair enough. Okay.
I guess the clarification that what Jimmy just talked about is not going to be part of 4.0.
Right, it's not on the
Great
4.0 list.
It'll be the
Yep.
next.
So that was it on our side. Again, I think open up to the broader audience here on the call. If there's anything that anyone has specific questions about as you've been working with PWA Studio, questions about the direction we're headed, or if anybody on the call, Jordan or Artyom or anyone wants to take the opportunity to show off anything you've been working on, this is a great chance to do that.
Well, I would love to show anything, but I'm not allowed to, so you guys
Yeah, that's the place that people get.
gotta wait a little bit more.
I would love, Jordan, for you to, if you'd like to, because the scaffolding PR is so significant and because it actually has implications for the use of, say, Fallback Studio. It's an alternative, I think, to that, although Fallback Studio is a more familiar paradigm for extension, the scaffolding to us is more sustainable for building a project that consumes the other stuff as dependencies rather than as overrides. I would love it if you take a look at that and offer some feedback. The core team, typically we review each other's PRs and we've had some impact from community, but I want you to feel free to just jump into our conversations and interrupt us.
Sure.
So it'd be great if you
Sure.
want to return.
Yeah, sure, no problem, will do.
That's 1500 if anyone else wants to look at that. PR 1500. Bingo. That's the one, man.
Okay, great. So unless we have any other general topic that the team or anyone on the call wants to discuss, I think that about wraps us up for this week. Onwards and upwards.
Onwards, upwards. See you guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.